Hi, it's Kevin Lobates here, and Anthony Day pointed me towards an interesting article concerning a lawsuit that is pending or about to be launched concerning the first NFT ever. So there's a chap called Kevin McCoy, and in 2014 he used the Namecoin blockchain to register what is arguably the first NFT. And Namecoin allows you to register domain names, kind of like DNS, however on a blockchain. And what Kevin McCoy did was he created an art piece called Quantum, which is an image, and he created a bunch of text in a Namecoin registration that contained something akin to a contract passing over the rights to the image Quantum to whoever owned that particular Namecoin. And it contained a URL to the image, and a hash of the image file as well, so that the image can be verified as being the correct one. Now, the thing about Namecoin is that the registration of a name lapses after a while, and you have to keep re-registering it. And what Kevin McCoy eventually did was not register it again. Then NFTs blew up and became huge, and Sotheby's worked with Kevin McCoy to reissue the NFT on the Ethereum blockchain using I presume ERC 721 standard, but I haven't checked the details. And they held an auction and they sold it for millions, because a lot of people saw this as potentially a piece of blockchain history that could be very, very valuable in the future. However, in the meantime, somebody else registered the original Namecoin again. Now, it had lapsed for several years, but they used the same identifier, re-registered, and put the same text in there. And then contacted Sotheby's and said, well, actually, we claim that we now own that art. And the person involved used a anonymous name, calling themselves Early NFT on Twitter, if I remember correctly. And they're now claiming that actually they therefore own the Ethereum NFT because they own the original one. So this really calls into question all sorts of questions about ownership, concepts of ownership, and how NFTs represent that ownership. Because if I was in Kevin's shoes, I think there are a bunch of defenses that you can use. And the first one, of course, it's clear that Kevin McCoy created the art. He had all the copyrights to it. Does a simple piece of text that he wrote one afternoon in a database count as a legal contract for transferring the copyrights? He's not a lawyer. It's not written as a proper contract. So I would firstly start by casting that into doubt. And if you get it in front of an elderly, skeptical judge, then the whole thing will probably get thrown out anyway. And quite frankly, I think most judges are, generally speaking, elderly and skeptical. But anyway, that aside. So then the second thing is that the coin lapsed and a new one was issued. So you can argue that there's a disconnect between the two, and although they have the same identifier, there's no provenance connecting the second one to the first one other than that identifier string, and that's just an arbitrary number. So is the new one that Early NFT minted really the same as the first one that Kevin McCoy issued? So that's another thing that you can then hammer in on and say, well, there's no continuity between these two things. And therefore the second one is not the same as the first, and therefore the rights are not transferred, because Early NFT actually had to go and claim the domain and copy paste the original contract into it. And of course, I can't just create an NFT and copy paste somebody else's contract in and say, now I own your stuff, in the same way that you can't take the deeds to a house and photocopy them and say, right, these papers now prove that I am the rightful owner of this house rather than you. So then the third thing that I start wondering about is, well, if you mint a new NFT in 2021 on Ethereum, does that mean therefore that it's the oldest NFT? And I'd say no, because now you've got the question of, well, again, there's not the link other than the fact that the artist involved sanctioned it. The artwork is still there. It's been in existence since 2014. Minting an NFT in 2021 and then claiming somehow that it links back to the 2014 one, you can't transfer objects from one blockchain to another in the same way that you can transport a rock from one end of a field to another. the digital world is not the same as the physical world. And in ledgers, what we do is we call it a transfer, but typically what you're doing is you're dropping a balance in one ledger and raising another ledger's balance by the equivalent amount. So it has the effect of being a transfer. And you can put notes in there saying that the two are related, but ultimately they're two separate events. And we start seeing all sorts of discussions that become philosophical about causality rather than not being maintained. So it's not, it's correlated in a sense, but it's not causation. The two events happen to happen at the same time, and we interpret them as being connected, but ultimately they're just two different events. But, you know, we could actually claim that about any kind of causation. It could be that the universe doesn't have causality, that we don't have A causes B. It could be that the universe just does A and then does B, and we as human beings interpret B as being caused by A, and the universe doesn't really care about causation. So it gets deeper and deeper. Anyway, I'm going to follow with interest what happens here. I imagine eventually early NFT will crawl away, and I think it's unlikely that they will win. But, you know, stranger things have happened in the blockchain world, and it's not intuitively obvious what is obvious in the blockchain world. So I guess it's worth monitoring. That's today's video. Hope you found it interesting, and I'll see you in the next one soon. Bye for now.